I have quite
Ooh.
we could recording.
We're going live now.
Yeah, going live.
No, I mean we're going on recording.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm a nurse and a Christian. I've been saved since I was 15, and my story is very conscientious, quite an academic person, artistic, and I got myself into nursing. It was a bit of a kid's dream thing. I don't know why really I went for nursing, but I stuck with it. I often wished I'd been an artist. But that's a different story, which I've written about in another book. However, the story of my relationship, which was a marriage with a man I met and was pursued very insistently, very, how should I say? I think I was a little bit naive. I was flattered. He was a very tall, handsome Trinidadian, and he lived in my country, the UK. And we fell in love, and we had a long distance romance, which was 2 cities apart.
Mm.
And within 9 months, we got married. And there was 2 different cultures. I never saw that as an issue. He had different skin color as well, and never saw that as an issue. He was well respected by his Trinidadian home culture and people, and also his English new friends. He'd been in the UK since he was 31 for
May I
about.
ask, Jill, what is your culture?
Mine is, I'm from England.
Okay, England.
Yeah.
Love that.
So yeah. So white British, Afro-Caribbean. In those days, which was 1991 when we married, it was not very common to see a black and a white person together. It is nowadays; it's very common, but in those days, to be married and to see a couple in a wedding ceremony in different of 2 such different cultures was unusual. And I think my parents had some misgivings. They were a little late in airing them, and I was annoyed with them for saying anything at the late stage they did, because it was probably a little bit of them thinking, well, you're 26, you know what you're doing, and them quietly feeling disappointed. And in some ways, I look back and I think, well, I wish they'd known him, because they didn't really know him. How could they have formed an opinion? I was swept off my feet. He was dyslexic. I had no idea. I helped him realize that. He was uneducated. He'd had a career in Trinidad, but it didn't translate into a real career in the UK. And so within a year of marriage, I'd been the breadwinner. He had not been allowed to take any public income, because that meant that he was going to affect his visa status. I was not naive on all of these things. The visa situation, which did become solid, it did become permanent as a spouse, but only a year after we married, so that was a stress. But we were strong in a church. We were in good company, and I had a good job. And I'd say the first 3 years, I thought, why is this supposed to be so difficult? I don't get it. It seems so easy. The first year is always the worst, they say, but it didn't feel like that. But then I started to realize that I was carrying the weight of the financial needs, the decision making, the career, and I was also
back
seeing.
then, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah.
What were you doing? What type
At that time?
Uh-huh.
In my career, I was a ward sister.
A what?
A ward sister, a hospital sister of a ward.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I changed into hospice and palliative care around that time, because that was my passion, to become a hospice nurse. So for 5 years or so after marriage, I was building my direction in that. And then we moved. And I moved away from a very strong relationship with my pastor, who had known since I was in my 20s. Because this was a career move, and she was failing, she was aging, and it was a different era. But I would say, looking back, that then I was in a new city. I had no one that knew me as I had been, and also was how can I say? I think I was probably struggling a little bit to understand just how isolated I was and neglected in my marriage. I didn't use those words. I had no idea. I did not feel nurtured at all, but I didn't have any language for that. And never really got broody, never had that sense that I needed to have children, but I thought it's about time I did. And so started my family, my first child at 29, and then another one 4 years later, who was a son. And so in this time, it was very hectic, very stressful. There was a sense, an increasing sense, that I was the only one who made anything happen. And I think now, looking back, that I would say that I was beginning to think there was something wrong, something really wrong, and I just could not put my finger on it. It was very, very lonely marriage, very lonely. And it was through friends, my new church at the time, and eventually some hard work looking at myself, trying to get my husband and I to work together on some inner reflections and kind of understand. But it was
What, if I may ask you, what year were you saved?
I was saved in 1980
Oh, okay. So before marriage, so you're walking in your full relationship with the Lord,
when I met.
your
Yeah,
husband.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And he had a genuine conversion experience. But you mentioned a word which, at the time I was in this situation, I had no knowledge of. I'll come back to it in a minute. But I was at a point where, because divorce was something that I would never, ever consider, it was just a no-no. It was never, ever an option for us. That when I heard, there was one occasion where I was heavily pregnant with my second child, and my husband had to go and do a very menial job with awful hours, very hard labor, and came back from one of those shifts when I was on maternity leave and slammed the paycheck down on a piece of furniture and said, "There's your rent." And it's just a little insight into how strained things were and how little love. And I think the harshness of that was very, very evident to me at that point. And I even worried that my child that I was forming at that point would pick up on all this stuff. So I'm really laboring this, but then surprisingly, we became noticed. We were always noticed. He was very tall, dark, handsome, head and shoulders above anyone, and very charming and very personable. And I was a capable one. And we were always leadership material. We were always escalated in terms of being noticed in church life and given roles. And we were at that point being noticed as possible candidates. We didn't realize, but we were actually asked to take over the church that we were attending.
Wow.
And the outgoing pastors sort of prepared us over a few months and then left us with the church.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a small church, but it was a responsibility, and I still worked, and my husband didn't. That was his thing. But actually, I think again, the weight, the responsibility for that was all on me. And we've carried on, but without going into an awful lot of detail, there was dysfunction. There was a very strange dynamic between the handover pastors who wanted to regulate and run everything from the other side of the world instead of handing over the baton, really. So we got some strong advice from a regional respected church that said, stand on your own 2 feet. If it's of God, if you have the faith, lead it, take it. And if it isn't, resign. I now know that probably I should have resigned, but that just did not seem right, because you want to serve God, you want to fulfill a dream and a call that is very real. Just not recognizing that you're not equipped with the structure and support around you to do that. So we took on quite an unrealistic burden, to be honest, with 2 small children, still working. And after 17 years of marriage, and then developing issues around serious jealousy, I would say, of my need to sometimes have peace, quiet, friends, chat, downtime. My difficulty in trusting my husband to lead, which must have been awful for him. But he had his own deep inferiority. And I only realised after the tussles got worse, and they were never physical, they were always emotional, they were always about painting an alternative reality that I couldn't remember which was which. And I just think I got completely lost, and to such a point that it was suggested that I had to separate from my best friend. I had to separate from my best friend because even a counsellor said that to me. This is something that you will have to do to prove that your relationship with your husband is the most important. And I say that not because there was a threat, but because there was a perceived threat. And I did submit to that advice. It was a really cruel time, and at the point that everything just caved in on me, I actually felt physically threatened, and I knew that we were failing God, failing the church, and there's no way on earth that we should pretend to be able to do what we were doing as pastors. So I actually resigned, and this obviously would cause a great deal of compromise to my husband's position, because he didn't have the capacity, and he didn't have any way of explaining to others why would that be. But this sounds really, it's quite hard. I've not revisited this story for a long time. But it does feel very weird and disjointed and very odd that 2 people would be so heavily involved in serving God, and yet at home I was so intimidated and so hopeless, so exhausted. Nothing I did made anything happen, and the church didn't grow. And so I got to that point where I really had to call it what it was, which was a failure. I resigned. I knew that we couldn't do it together, and I knew that I couldn't do it on my own. I didn't want to do it on my own. Maybe we would have had a chance without the church as well to look after. But in actual fact, the reaction to that was so strong, was so angry that I felt I had to escape. So it was like a dream. I actually had a runaway time where my son was staying with my parents anyway, but I took my then teenager girl very early one morning, between having been threatened by my husband to be outed as a woman who was inappropriate with her friend. And I don't even need to use other language. It was totally rubbish. But he said, I'm going to come back and tell your parents exactly what sort of woman you are.
Oh, wow. Oh, well,
And I,
that's a typical
yeah.
abusive language right there.
So I lay there at 5 in the morning thinking, okay, you've gone to work. Am I going to lay here and wait for you to come back and carry that out? And I thought, no. So I snapped. I took everything that you do, the passport, the underwear, the money, the birth certificate, and my child that was still in the house at that time with me. And my friend took me to stay with my sister in another country about 200 miles away.
Wow.
I confiscated my daughter's phone at the time just so it could be out of contact. It was a very strange, very, very disorderly thought process that was going through my head, but it just had to be safe. And that was the only thing that mattered.
Absolutely.
And yeah. So I was only away for a week, very distressing, very difficult, very really disappointing to find out that some of the key people that one would have expected to feel like they needed to find out what on earth is wrong and how are you.
So how were you feeling when you left for that week? What was going on through your mind when you
Um,
were gone for a whole week? Were you
mm,
thinking anything like, "Oh, I finally feel peace," or did you think, "Oh, this is wrong. This is terribly wrong. I need to go
no,
back"?
it didn't feel peaceful because although I knew that I'd had to do that to feel how real the danger was and it had been escalating, Um, I didn't have any answers. I didn't have anywhere to go. I couldn't take my kids out of school. I had to live in a house that I was paying for. I had to go back. So I did. And I did. And I slept in a box room after that, under a desk for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was the only one who could afford to keep the house. And I couldn't afford a different apartment. Even a temporary separation would have been great for at least some attempt to reconcile or work out what was wrong. But it was just we just had to live under the same roof, estranged and very determined actually that now I realize, having read up on some of these symptoms and some of these behaviors. And this was after 15 months of email counseling too, by the way, which he wouldn't engage with. I realized he was a narcissist.
Wow. I like the real one. Now when you say narcissist, because people
Mm.
want to know,
Yeah,
that word is being used a lot
it is
now.
a lot. It wasn't then, but yes,
Right,
it is.
right. So with the word being used a
Yeah.
lot, people may think like, oh, that's just a word, and that just
Hmm.
means somebody's a little crazy, a little off. But there's an actual
Yeah.
medical
Yeah.
uh, for word for it. It's
Yeah.
narcissistic
Yeah.
personality disorder, and it's an
Which I totally.
actual thing. It's an actual thing. And
Yeah.
there's people, everybody may have, a counselor once told me, everybody has a little narcissistic in them. Okay, we're talking, the normal kind of things, but this is a very serious thing when we're
Mm,
talking narcissistic personality disorder.
absolutely.
That is the actual disorder. They can be tested for it, but most ones that
Will
have
not.
that disorder, they will never get tested because they think
Never.
nothing's wrong with them. It's always you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's always pointed at you and it's always going against you. So with that, and it's very traumatic when
Mm,
you're faced with a narcissist.
mm,
A lot of times though, with narcissists, when you said jealousy, you said trust, and then no fruit coming from the ministry. You know,
mm,
it's a spirit. It's a spirit that we can't see physically, but it is a
mm.
spirit that goes around and it does try to attack ministry and ministry work
Yeah,
and also people. So the narcissist will also push a believer, towards God, actually, to the utmost, where you're just laid on your face, flat on your face. Thank you, Jesus. I love you. I'm ready for my miracles and I'll do whatever you need me to do. And he comes in and he vindicates and rescues. Now, from that, all that, what you went through, oh my gosh, Jill, I never knew this about your story. I am just like, you have my heart.
mm. I'm sure you have your own stories and
Sharing
quibble.
one to another,
Mm,
mama to mama,
mm.
sister to sister, you have my heart. So I'm just like, what brought you to, and what do you do now? What brought you from all of that, and where are
Yeah,
you now currently?
okay. So the key thing really was just to focus on my children having a really clear understanding that this was not the best as for anyone. It wasn't a good example of marriage. It was a bad example. We had to call it what it was. I made a very firm decision that it wouldn't be one of those relationships where each ex was vitriolic towards one another. The children had still got their father and mother to live with as long as we are alive, and therefore my focus was on having the house, being able to raise them safely in the home, and being able to mitigate against any rubbish, any lies, in the best possible way, grow myself and heal from very, very great disappointments, which is hope deferred does make the heart sick. And that was where I was, very broken, but obviously in love with God, did not blame him. I focused on having
That's an
a job.
incredible place. A lot of people will take their situations and then they'll be angry at God.
Um,
And it's sad to hear.
yeah.
But it's just where they are, and maybe they need some things to be worked out, psychologically or what have you, or just emotionally from
Mm,
childhood, from their own daddies, their own mamas, whatever they went through, and then they just get angry at God and go a whole nother direction. But we do have a choice. We can either
yes, we do.
go in the direction of the Lord, or we can
Yeah,
go the other way. And you chose to go the other way. That's awesome.
I did because there's no way Britain could have served me or those two who were 10 and 14 at the beginning of this journey. So my focus was on having a job that would enable me to be able to get them to school, feed them after school, help them with everything they were doing in their formative years. And career obviously was on a nosedive, but that was fine. Um, I was very much hand to mouth financially for many, many years. Um, Good friends,
Just
support.
really quick before it shuts off, I wanted to ask you really quick, what do you do now? What are you doing currently and what
Sure.
online
So,
and what do you for others?
so I revived. I heard Craig Groeschel once, a famous speaker, American pastor, say that artists can repurpose their gifts, their products, their imaginations, and that's what I've done. So the whole vision, which was for the church, is now an allegory or a metaphor, which has become a book, which has become a model for discipleship, which is now the script for a game, which is really my passion for just growing people and helping them to make right choices with their characters and become strong in the Lord. And this is my desire, that I have the ability to reach a new generation who will face all the same nonsense that we've faced, but they also have additional pressures of the internet, the metaverse, the confusion between reality and artificial intelligence, and they need so much guidance, and it has to be done in a way that's fun. So I'm determined that I am able to bring my gift of writing, because that comes from 50 years of journaling, my painful and positive experiences, that I can create characters that overcome within the game and who are rewarded for their right choices within the game. So that's really what I'm on with creatively. I'm creative, and
Awesome. So if they need to
taking-
get in touch with Gill, it's
yeah,
Bentham, correct? Gill Bentham, and that you are a writer
yeah,
and you create things for the game.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. That's so
Let
cool.
me-
I'm just gonna
yeah,
pause.
you're welcome. Thank you for